It's not as simple as I got an email from Amazon. They said I should expand to, to Turkey.
And Amazon will make it sound like, oh, it's just, bippity boppity boo. We're going to handle it. No, that's not going to be how that goes. There's going to be a lot of work on your end.
Welcome to Top of Search with Robin and Abe, where we talk about e-commerce, Amazon, and more.
Welcome to the Top of Search podcast. I'm Robin Johnson, and this is Abe Chamali, and we talk about all things Amazon e-commerce. And today we're talking specifically about when do you want to go off Amazon? Because Amazon is an amazing marketplace, but it's not the only game in town. There's a time and a place to expand, but we've also seen clients try to do it too soon and waste time, energy, tie up inventory, overall thwart their overall business goals by trying to expand too fast. I'm sure you have stories like that, Abe.
Oh, yes, I've seen it plenty of times. Too many.
I think when, Amazon is so powerful and it is a great place to get started, and you want to maximize that as much as possible. But, I feel like there's also a lot of desire to diversify. What if the account was to get suspended or something along those lines? And then there's always the question for international expansion. And those are both really, really good things, but there's a time and place for everything, including those expansions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like you said, this is a thing which comes up for businesses often. The thing is Amazon a place where I need to concentrate all of my efforts, or can I be doing even better by being elsewhere? And the first thing we need to do is understand how well we're doing on Amazon, or at least when I speak to businesses that are having this consideration. I said, the first thing you want to understand is how well are you doing on Amazon right now? And then the second part of it is, where would you want to expand to? So the first part of it is, how well are you doing on Amazon? As a general guidance, I tell people that you should consider expanding when your Amazon business is generally close to peak sales and peak efficiency. So Amazon right now, Amazon US, is generally the place where any business that wants to sell in e-commerce can sell the most with the least effort. The combination of the two, that's Amazon. The most shoppers live there. The most searches happen there. It is the easiest place to get your product in front of a shopper that doesn't know you yet. It is the easiest place to grow your sales once you have an established brand or product. So Amazon US is number one. And if you're doing it right, it can be a huge number one. Now, if you have that all in place, then you might want to expand elsewhere. But a trap that I see often is brands will not be doing so great on Amazon, and they'll be looking for greener pastures, and they'll say, well, maybe I should go here or there or a third place. I heard this place is great. And they'll put a lot of effort into a place which great is a quote unquote great. So they'll say, everybody's doing great on Walmart. Well, it's great compared to no sales. It's not great compared to what you can get on Amazon. And once we start to have that discussion, that frames things a little bit differently. So generally what we try to tell brands is, depending on the marketplace, it will give you something like 2, 3, 5% extra per channel. Generally, of course, there are exceptions. Of course, there are people who have a story about owning the world on a different marketplace. Yes, that's not the usual thing. That's not the thing you should plan for. So expect that those other channels will give you some extra business, but not the real amount. So if you're selling $1,000 a day on Amazon, if you're going to sell 5 or 10% extra on Walmart, how much extra effort are you going to put for $50 or $100 a day in sales? That is not a lot compared to how much work you'll put into it. So first off, you want to start by understanding how well you're doing and what extra sales that extra effort will give you. Once you're comfortable with how your Amazon sales are, then you can start to evaluate where to go next.
There are times when you have an audience that's really, really, really going to be on a specific marketplace. So if you know that you're doing like like engine parts, and because of the number of people who use eBay to buy used parts, that's going to be where your target audience is. Or you're marketing a tool for a sport that's primarily in other countries. It's much more popular. So maybe you're doing rugby sports equipment. Then there is definitely a chance that an international market might even do better for you than Amazon. But all of the other marketplaces in all of the other countries pretty much are smaller, and they all have their own regulations. Their ads run differently. Like in order to be successful, really successful on Walmart, you have to use WFS. And for international, you have to send your inventory there, especially if you're having production and stock issues here in the US. We've seen it where customers have tried to expand out, and then that inventory gets tied up in Amazon UK, or it gets tied up in WFS where it's not moving as quickly. And they could have easily had those units sold if they had just focused on Amazon.com.
Yep, agreed. Part of it is, like we said, the amount of resources it's going to take to get those extra sales. There are things from, if you're talking about international channels of Amazon, you've got translation issues, you've got regulatory issues, you have inventory issues, which are really, really different than what you'd need with Amazon. You have things like VAT and return addresses and lots of considerations that you really need to have all lined up. And if you don't, Amazon doesn't like it. And of course, nobody wants to be on the wrong side of Amazon liking you. So you need to have everything buttoned up, and then it still needs to be worthwhile after all that investment. It's not as simple as, I got an email from Amazon. They said I should expand to Turkey. All right, well, Amazon Turkey is not as simple as just replying yes to an email. You've got a lot of work to do.
And Amazon will make it sound like, oh, it's just, bippity boppity boo, we're going to handle it. No, that's not going to be how that goes. There's going to be a lot of work on your end. And so I think Abe and I are aligned in this. When we're working with clients, we strongly recommend that if you're hitting kind of your market cap in your space in Amazon.com, or you're getting close to that, or your volume is high enough where 10 to 20% of your Amazon sales would be worth the lift of an extra channel, and you kind of have things already running and you're past kind of that initial launch phase to be going into other marketplaces.
Yeah. I mean, if we would summarize it, I would say the first part for evaluating whether you should leave Amazon to go to other pastures is to evaluate whether you are really maximizing the sales that are available to you on Amazon. So number one, you want to make sure you're getting as much as Amazon can possibly give you. And number two, do you have the human and financial resources to do the work it's going to take to be somewhere else?
And the financial resources to handle if there is a hiccup that you didn't expect. Was there a compliance document or testing that you didn't expect, and then now your product won't pass, and now you have to pull that inventory back? So you had that inventory in limbo, especially if you've got goods that don't have a long shelf life. That's really important to consider.
I was going to say, it's interesting you mentioned that, because most often the conversation starts when a brand has two situations, or three, I guess. Situation number one is they heard from a friend or from some social media that another marketplace is great. This is number one. Number two, they got an email from one of these other marketplaces suggesting it would be easy to go to that other marketplace. And the third situation is when somebody has a lot of extra inventory. So someone might say, hey, I have a lot of inventory. Maybe I can move it in Mexico, or maybe I can move it in the UK. Let me just expand there, or let me just send some product there. And the idea of just sending some product somewhere, it sounds great. It sounds easy. It never works out well. You really have to treat each place you sell as a place you are trying to be effective.
And there are times and places where it can be a really powerful thing to expand out. So we have a client that was already in Walmart, Costco, Lowe's, Home Depot. And because of that, they knew that there were potential sales on Walmart.com. So for them, being able to expand out into SKUs that their Walmart direct retail channels weren't accepting some of these other SKUs, they were able to sell those directly. For them, they were able, and by adopting WFS, we were able to take them from like a couple $100 a day in Walmart to it being a multi, six-figure a year thing. But it's still going to always be smaller than Amazon, even for something that, their product was sold in Walmart. So it does have that target. But for them, that expansion added a lot to their bottom line. And because the Walmart fees are a little lower. So there doesn't mean that there's not a good reason to move internationally. It just means that we don't want to do that until we're ready. I want to make sure that things are stable on the U.S. side, that you're profitable on the U.S. side, and you have that availability in wiggle room financially and inventory wise before you make the leap.
Now, once you have decided whether it's worth it for you to try something else, the next step is to decide where to go, because each of those things has its own considerations and they're really, really different, I think. So if we look at, for example, one group of options is other Amazon sales channels. whether it's Canada, whether it's South American channels, whether it's European or Asian channels. Amazon has a lot of marketplaces besides US, and that feels like it could be a natural extension of what you're doing. And the truth is, there are two sides to it. So there are definitely pluses to it. One plus is that your brand already has a history with Amazon, and it does have value across the network. Another thing is that in most cases, review counts are shared across marketplaces. So if you've got a product which was very popular in the US, it has accumulated hundreds or thousands of reviews, launching it on the next marketplace will absolutely start off with a pop. So you have a value there. The opposite happens also, by the way. Very frequently, if you start by being diverse and launching your product on a few different marketplaces, you can accumulate a high quantity of reviews in the place that counts the most, in the US. So those few reviews in each place all count to the US presence. So it's definitely useful there as well. So those are the things which are pros for selling on Amazon International. And of course, you already are familiar with Seller Central. You're already familiar with the ad console. The partners you work with usually are very capable at managing multiple international marketplaces. The lift is not so different. Those things are all pros.
One thing that, if you get into like broader digital marketing, one thing that you'll hear a lot is search intent or user intent. And so the idea of that is the way that you ask Siri or Alexa, or the way things that you type in for Google versus maybe you would for, in a different kind of search engines. You go to each search engine based off of your intent. So I might go to Google if I'm looking for information. I go to Amazon if I'm looking for products. I might go to, a more kind of like a forum if I'm looking for opinions. So we want to carry that idea over to marketplaces and looking at international versus other marketplaces. Where are your potential customers? Where is your customer avatar living? If you have a good customer base in the US, but you know that this product would do well in other countries, that it's compliant, if it's electronic, does it have the right electrical components, all of that good stuff, then we can look at international because we do get the kind of the benefit of the listing and the ads are the same. You do, even if you're going to the UK, you want to have that translated because even English to English, and especially like Spanish to Spanish, the Spanish that's in Spain and some of the words that are used in maybe Mexico or Central America are all very different. So you want to make sure you localize that language to make it sound, good. Just the way that when you read a Chinese listing, something's a little off, even though they're using English, they don't use the right words, right? So we want to take the time to do that.
Everybody has seen listings and everybody has seen instruction manuals that were clearly not written by somebody in the country of choice. So you don't want to be that person in Germany. You don't want to be the person that just ran it through Google Translate and every form of a word, every conjunction, like everything is different all the way down to the slang. You want to be using current modern language that everybody can resonate with, and using a translation company is really, really a key to getting that done right.
And it's worth the time and effort. Even we have a lot of bilingual team members, and even about the sensor from Central America, when we're going to a Spanish-speaking country on the other side of the world, we always still do localization because a lot of words will change. Even if you look at something as simple as the UK talking about French fries versus chips, or stroller and buggy and cart, they're all different words. And we want to do that to make sure that our customers feel like the product is good quality, that we understand them, helping get into the psychographics of the marketing to those customers, but also even just for understanding search and ranking and the most important keyword phrases. So worth the time.
100%. Now, that's actually one of the things in which you'll be doing a lot of work, but also to take advantage of it is definitely easier because we understand Amazon's SEO. We understand how Amazon prioritizes words. We understand how to put them into effective places in listings and also to leverage it for ads. So that work is something which is easy to turn into results. It's hard to do at first because, again, the languages are different, but leveraging it once you've done that work is something which fits into what you do already. So there's both sides of it, but it can lean towards an advantage if you manage it right.
And all of those things kind of work together. The other big thing for international is that you have to get that inventory over there. So what is the number one rule for selling on Amazon? We don't run out of stock.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's number 1, 2, and 3 is do not run out of stock.
it is the 10 commandments are all don't run out of stock, don't run out of inventory, don't run out of items. Like it's, keep your.
Listen, I know that this isn't necessarily like an advertising episode, but definitely whenever I'm speaking to somebody who's interested in working with me, the first question I ask, or one of the first questions I ask is, how is your inventory? And I said, I don't want to hear that inventory is fine. What I want to hear is that if everything goes right and the ads turn your sales up by 5x, do you have enough to keep sales and inventory flowing with no hiccup? And that's got to be the same for international markets. You need to have the goods over there. You don't want to run out of stock. And you also don't want to run into a dangerous situation where if overseas does well and you want to keep feeding it, you don't have enough to keep both US and international fed effectively. So all of a sudden, one or the other is going to get hurt. And I've seen that happen also. People send X number of units. They think it's going to last 6 months. When it lasts 6 weeks and they have to send more, all of a sudden, they're looking at which marketplace am I going to let run out of stock? There's no good answer to that one.
You're going to lose money, and you will have burned money on advertising to rank no matter what you do. Even if it's, we had a brand that they couldn't keep up with demand, and they had to decide between fulfilling their Walmart retail orders or filling Amazon orders. And no matter what they do, there are consequences. Really think about where our inventory is, what are our lead times, are they changing, and watching our COGS as well.
That leads, it's funny, you mentioned Walmart, but it almost seems like Walmart gets its own conversation at some point,
Yeah, so now let's talk specifically about if you are in one of those situations where you are ready to expand. You have inventory, you have the capital, you have the time in order to expand into other marketplaces. Or maybe you're looking to expand because Amazon, maybe you had a skin bleaching product and the compliance for that has gotten a lot tighter on Amazon, and you're looking at other marketplaces to sell within, the legal compliance of those other marketplaces. So let's start with the big one in the U.S. first, and then we'll talk about some U.S. ones, and then we'll talk about a little bit about some of the international expansions. But I think Walmart should be the one that is the most logical for a good number of brands.
Yeah, Walmart is the one that gets the most attention. Realistically, unless you have a specific situation where another marketplace fits effectively, Walmart is definitely going to be your second channel after Amazon, but it really is different. It's not as simple as Amazon just spelled with different letters. Walmart is a place which functions differently and rank run differently, and you need to understand that. I think the first place to think about is the fact that searches on Walmart run really differently than searches on Amazon. But the trap is that people think Walmart works the same way. Walmart does not at all work that same way. And a couple of Walmart executives gave me a very eye-opening explanation of the shopping path on Walmart. So on Amazon, something like 95% or more of all purchases start at the search bar. People search, people buy. However, on Walmart, only 50% of sales come from somebody going to that search bar and buy. It's a crazy thing to think about, but half of the purchases come from people searching or people clicking into those sections on the homepage. So they talk about spring shoes for your daughter, or Easter is coming up and look at our selection of Easter eggs, or whatever sections might be on the homepage. People go to the homepage, browse it, and click on things from there. Those lead to sales. Now, what makes that tricky? You can't target those sections with ads usually, and a lot of those search results and even the sections which are on the homepage are curated by humans. Humans are deciding what goes on the homepage, and in a lot of cases, people are deciding what products are highlighted once you get into those sections. So your work is to figure out a way to get the attention of the people making those decisions. Search, you do your work on search, but the rest of it, the display part of it, needs to be figured out differently. One part of it is sales history. That gets the attention of people who are making those decisions. Another part of it is, unfortunately, that a lot of it is based on retail sales. Products that do well in Walmart stores tend to do very well in Walmart retail. Products that are only available.com tend to do less well. Like, in addition to the fact that half of the sales come from display, there's another sort of sneaky thing. When Walmart gives their sales numbers out for the Walmart.com, a lot of those sales are for orders that are picked up. They included in. They are not genuinely orders which are available for any e-commerce seller to capture. It's something where it was available in the local store. It got put into the cart, and the shopper came and picked it up. Somebody who's just sending in goods to WFS or somebody who sends things to shoppers cannot capture those sales at all. So that's another thing to be aware of as you think about what the potential is. So it makes it a little bit of a tricky situation. It makes it a situation in which you have to understand what the potential is. And each of those factors brings down the potential a little bit. Now, if you can manage to get into Walmart retail, you can do unbelievably well. I have brands that flounder on Amazon. They are high ticket items, $100 plus. They are fighting with Chinese sellers who are as good at one-fourth of the price, one-fifth of the price, because they're just doing the things that Chinese sellers do. They don't have to worry about branding. They don't have to worry about quality control and compliance. They're just coming in at fractions of the price. But this brand is in Walmart retail. They have a very good product. They have a nationally known brand. They are in the stores. Every time they launch a product on Walmart.com, because the product is in retail, the .com sells 1,000 units a day, right off the bat. $99 price point, $100,000 a day right off the bat. Now, you can't reproduce it. They know the buyer. They know the buyer personally. The buyer says, they sort of hint. Nobody can say something directly, but they sort of hint that it's good to be in retail and they'd like the selection that's in .com to match what's in retail. And that leads to the sales. Now, it's not for everybody, but if you are selling in Walmart retail, absolutely make sure you're selling on .com, because you're leaving a lot of sales on the table if you don't do that.
And, we have a lot of like luxury brands who, 5 years ago, I never would have ever suggested that they sell on Walmart, because there was the idea that it would tarnish your brand if you were being sold on Walmart. Walmart has actually been seeing a big increase in six-figure earners coming to their site. And I will tell you, I'm one of those. I always use Instacart because the closest Costco is 20 minutes away. And, I've got busy lives and kids, so I always did almost all of my groceries on Instacart. Recently, Amex made Walmart Plus part of the Platinum card, so I thought I would try out Walmart. And I'm finding I'm ordering more and more on Walmart myself, even knowing kind of and having this gravitation towards Amazon. So there is a lot more marketplace. In fact, one of the things that we most recently bought was some soap that we had at the St. Regis in Venice. So there are some really high-end brands that either planned or not, could be resellers. Though we are finding buyers for higher end products on Walmart for the right categories. So while it might have not been on your map to be on Walmart before, it might be worth it now as the demographics of the chain in general have been shifting a little bit. And so we do want to think about that. And like Abe said, the search is very different. The ads running very different, but it can be a really great marketplace. The other thing you want to consider is, in order to really get significant sales on Walmart, you do have to participate in the Walmart fulfillment service, which is basically FBA for Walmart. We find that we see a huge lift when we use WFS versus not using WFS. So that would tie up inventory in a different place. And the reporting for Walmart is just not caught up to Amazon. A while back ago, there was a fire in a warehouse and they basically said, "This is how much we're reimbursing you. Trust us." So there can be some things like that.
They have a lot to grow in terms of how well they work with brands and sellers. The customer support
or lack thereof.
There's a lot to be desired. I mean, it's a running frustration with Amazon sellers about how it is to work with Seller Central or seller support. But once they get onto Walmart, if they have any scale of issues, they say, "I wish I was dealing with Amazon," as bad as that might be.
I mean, it can take months to get something simple like a bullet changed. And it used to be that way all the time. Anytime you need to make any listing change, it took forever. It's gotten a lot better. They're investing a lot. They are definitely actively reaching out and working with sellers. But the gap is still pretty big between the seller experience on the two marketplaces for sure.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, when it comes to Walmart, it's definitely fair to say that dealing with Walmart is its own sort of beast to work with. Now, having said that, again, you have to take one step back and say, what are you going to get out of this? Most commonly, after all of this discussion, after WFS and listings and all of these things, most commonly, at least from what we see, sellers who are established and don't have any of those good angles to work with, the most common type of seller will see 5 to 10% of Amazon's volume coming from Walmart. That's most common. A lot do less than that. A few do more than that. A few hit their home runs, of course, but most commonly something like 5 to 10%. And the evaluation needs to be, is 5 or 10% worth all of the things to do? In a lot of cases, it is. And this actually leads to another consideration. We started off the episode by talking about needing to make sure your Amazon is maxed out before going into other channels. But the other side is absolutely true also, in which it is super important to be diverse. Amazon is a fickle partner sometimes, and if something does not go as expected, all of those other resources, all of those other places of selling that you have put resources into, all of a sudden become your favorite partners. So it is, if at all possible, and you can make it work, be on Walmart, be on Target, be in HomeDepot.com. If you can manage to create an eBay store, that is really, really good, especially for selling out last year's products or short-dated goods or things like that. eBay is fantastic for things like that. I work with people who sell on Etsy. You work with people who sell on Mercado Libre. So there are a lot of places besides Amazon to be. And again, although on one hand, you want to be very healthy on Amazon before there, you also do want to be on those other places as soon as you can. Both things are true.
And we never know, there was a time when everybody assumed eBay would never be unseated as the king of e-commerce. Would have been laughable to even suggest. I think even both of us were in the e-commerce space when that happened. And, so we never know when there's going to be a shift. Sears was the biggest, catalog order company for a very long time. Every product, every company has a life cycle. And so it's good. Walmart has been actively working. Target's been actively working on building out their marketplace. It's still pretty difficult to get into that, comparatively to Walmart or Etsy or eBay, which are all pretty easy. I think you said you had some clients that were doing really well on Faire. We have a couple clients that are doing well on Faire as well.
Yeah, I have a couple of clients on Faire. Doing well is probably a stretch. Yeah, they're not doing well, but they are on Faire, and it is definitely part of a multi-pronged approach. They are very much of the mind that they need to be everywhere. They have the resources and the capabilities, and they put themselves everywhere. And sometimes the sales comes from unexpected places. There are days when Amazon is slow and the other marketplaces weirdly seem to pick up much more than their piece of the pie those days. So being everywhere is really important.
And if you're looking at international expansions, a lot of times people will just immediately go to Canada because that's the closest. That's not necessarily the best marketplace. Canada is a very large country land-wise, but the Amazon Canada marketplace is not the biggest international marketplace for you to be.
So I'm not sure if you've heard the same things I have, but anecdotally and from what I see, Amazon Canada tends to be 10% of the US market. Now, the thing is, because of its proximity, it actually does tend to be an easier country to work with. So language tends to be the same. You don't have to do as much work for translation. Sending things into Amazon can be a challenge, but it is generally easier than going across an ocean. Goods can, if you're large enough that you are sending containers to every marketplace, you can send all of your containers to a US marketplace and then diversify to Canada as needed. But for the UK, if you're sending containers, some of your containers are going to the US, some of your containers are going to Europe, and multiple places in Europe because of Brexit. So you are splitting up your inventory, and you are keeping it from Amazon US if needed. If you need to divert some goods for US for a lightning deal or something, you can squeeze Canada a little bit more easily than you can get bringing in goods from overseas or from the UK. So it is another thing to think about.
I think we should briefly touch on the difference between NARF versus sending your stuff over into Canada. If you're using, basically Amazon will sell it like, you just send me your inventory, man, I'll just take care of it. It'll be awesome. And they will to some degree, but there's some things you need to know. The fees that are shown in the Seller Central are not accurate for NARF a lot of times. So you need to make sure that you're increasing the price. And for NARF, if you set it at a certain price, the price will be higher in that other country. So if you're trying to maintain like a price parity or similarity for maybe if you have brick and mortar over in those other countries and you're trying to like manage to an MSRP, that's something to consider as well. So just keep those things in mind. There are times and places where, for most companies, like using NARF, if they have the margins, will work. But if not, you might want to consider sending over those containers, but you have to have enough volume for it to really make sense to do that.
Yeah. There's one other thing which almost needs to get its own bullet point, which is if you're extending NARF to Mexico, you need to actively watch your sales to Mexico. The reason I say that is there is a weird glitch which has happened more than a couple of times. Now, hopefully it never happens again, but it has happened more than a couple of times in which your US price is translated into the same number of pesos. So $49.95 translated into $49.95 pesos is
a lot less.
tiny. Yes, it is a tiny fraction. And what ends up happening is somebody catches it and somebody buys out your entire inventory. They will buy 4 months of goods for $17. And all of a sudden, there are no more goods. So when you watch your sales and you catch it, it is possible to have Amazon cancel those orders en masse. It is its own pain in the butt to do, but it is a thing that Amazon could do for you with the right amount of yelling. You got to catch it. If you catch it a day and a half later, the goods are already shipped. You're done. You need to catch it in a couple of hours. So if you're going to sell in Mexico, actively be aware of this being a possibility. You don't need to obsess over it. You certainly don't need to refresh Mexico sales 102 times a day. But be aware. Just like when you drive, you need to be aware of what's happening in the lane next to you. You sell on Amazon, you need to be aware and watching those sales in Mexico. It doesn't seem to happen for Canada. I haven't seen it happen in other places, but Mexico has had that glitch. Be super careful about it.
And there's automations that you can set up, kind of jerry-rig to kind of watch that for you as well. And that's not to say don't use NARF. It's a great program. But, Mexico has its own challenges. And, a lot of people in like the Mexico and Central America will use Mercado Libre. So if that's an audience you're really targeting, that marketplace is really more set up for some of the challenges that can be in that geographical part of the world. I will tell you, we have a lot of people that live in Costa Rica and those kind of countries. And when they shop Amazon, they buy from Amazon.com, and then they have it all sent to Miami, and that is sent on a weekly basis. So if you're looking to reach some of those folks, it might not even make sense to do that, depending on where your target audience is. But it primarily is like, it's going to be Mexico, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Venezuela, Panama, Nicaragua, those kind of countries.
So is it a website that people in those countries go to purchase? Like instead of typing Walmart.com, they're going to type MercadoLibre.com.
Yes.
Or dot whatever.
We talked about Walmart. We talked about, Etsy can be a great, if you've got like a crafting supply, then Etsy can be a great place. But with all of these other smaller marketplaces, you don't want to just be there to be there. You want to be there because your audience is there.
Some of them happen to not be in the United States, for sure.
Yes.
But no, Rakuten fits in there probably. And obviously Mercado Libre fits in. So they can be either US or not US based, but they're just not extensions of Amazon. So that's, I guess, the thing which unifies all those guys. And a thing to keep in mind, since you're mentioning it, is how much do you want to take on an international basis? Because language is always going to be a factor. As you communicate with buyers, you're going to be, you better have a good translation tool for those communications. And as you communicate, even with the teams of those countries, like with the Mercado Libre staff, if their staff are speaking, if they're all speaking Spanish or Portuguese or whatever it might be, you will need to communicate with those guys effectively as well. So it is a thing to keep in mind.
And it is like Amazon in the way that there are different marketplaces for different countries. So, but with all of those, you want to be thinking about where your customer is. Do you have the ability to really focus on getting those customers adequate response? Do you have the inventory? And then the biggest thing is everything that you say yes to, you're saying no to something else. And that's something I have to remind myself as an entrepreneur quite often is if I say yes to expanding to Chewy and I'm a pet product, that makes a lot of sense. If I say yes to expanding to Walmart and we're a high-end luxury item that's, we don't feel like that Walmart customer is there and we're not doing a ton of sales on Amazon.com, I could be taking that time that I would have spent on Walmart and focusing on building up brand affinity, awareness around our products, doing PR, making sure the logistics for our company and the distribution, working on like brick and mortar. There's things that I would be saying no to if I'm saying yes to this. So the question shouldn't just be like, do it to do it, but what am I going to have to not do? What am I going to be turning down as far as opportunities in order to pursue these other marketplaces? And just like all business, expect it's going to take more time and more money than you expect, because these things always do.
Yep, that's true for business. It's true for home renovations. It's probably true for everything that has a significant dollar amount attached to it. Everything is more than you expected.
Always.
All right. So if we had to sort of give a listener the bullet point for how to think about other marketplaces, what would that look like? You want me to take a stab at it?
Yeah, you take a stab at it, and then I'll add on if there's anything you missed, but I'm sure you'll get it all.
All right. So here is the marketplace bullet list for someone who wants to snap ahead to whatever minute this is. So step 1, evaluate how well you're doing on Amazon, whether you're leaving a lot of Amazon capacity on the table, and whether you have the human resources and the inventory resources to be in another marketplace. That's step 1. If you pass that check, the next step is to decide where you want to expand to. Expanding to other places consists of two main directions. Direction number 1, additional international marketplaces for Amazon. And that's going to have its own group of considerations. The second way is additional marketplaces that are not Amazon. Some of those marketplaces are in the US. Some of those marketplaces might be international. Those will have their own considerations, whether it's Walmart with retail, whether it's Mercado Libre with foreign language. Each of those will have their pluses. Each of those will have their considerations, but decide where you want to be. And one thing we didn't touch on is really try to be as good about planning as you can. All of the challenges that I see with the brands I work with come from not having thought through what happens if you're successful. That's it. Ask yourself the question, if this is successful, what do I need to do to keep it being successful? And plan for success, plan for challenges, plan both directions, but really important to plan for success. Because if you don't, you blow it, So that's sort of my checklist.
Yeah, I think that's pretty right on. It's, do you have the resources? Is the lift going to be high enough? So it can be a really great thing. You want to be diversified. You want to help your brand find new audience. But remember, we want to maximize any easy lift that's from Amazon first. So we hope this episode has been helpful. This has been another episode of the Top of Search podcast, and we hope that you've enjoyed listening to it as much as we have recording it, and have a prosperous week.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Top of Search podcast. Have a burning question you would like answered or a topic you would like featured in a future episode? You can submit it at topoffsearchshow.com. If you love the episode, subscribe and leave a review. Each month, we'll be selecting one reviewer to win a one-on-one call with your choice of Abe or Robin. Winners will be announced at the end of the first episode of every month.